June 29th, 2024, State of Mexico. A white Chevrolet Suburban comes screaming through traffic, weaving past cars like the driver's got nothing left to lose. He spots a police patrol up ahead, cuts across 2 lanes, and flags them down, begging for an escort. Seconds later, both vehicles are tearing toward the nearest hospital, sirens blasting. Inside that SUV is a young woman, critical condition. Doctors rush her into the ER, fighting to keep her alive. But it's already too late. She's pronounced dead within minutes, multiple gunshot wounds, no chance to save her. When police finally get a look at the vehicle, they find a blood stain smeared across the right rear door. Inside the cabin, forensic techs pull several deformed bullets from the seats and panels. A young woman shot down in broad daylight on a public street in front of anyone who happened to be watching. Before we go further, if you're into true crime documentaries built on real facts and real case files, drop a comment and let me know where in the world you're watching this from. And hit subscribe, because we break down cases like this one every single week. At first, this looks like a robbery that went sideways. A wrong place, wrong time kind of tragedy. But it doesn't take long for investigators to realize this shooting is tied to something much bigger. A brutal fight over a fortune worth millions. And the accusations flying around this case, they're not coming from strangers or rivals. They're coming from inside the victim's own family. This is a story about secrets buried inside one of the most recognizable families in the country. Who was the woman inside that white SUV? And why did her death set off a chain reaction of arrests that no one saw coming? Let's stick to the facts. Investigators move fast, and it doesn't take them long to identify the victim. Her name is Martha Paola Salcedo, 29 years old, born and raised in Guadalajara, the capital of Jalisco. She studied public relations in college, but instead of settling into some quiet office job, she carved out a name for herself in sports broadcasting. She hosted her own shows, built a real following, and she had the kind of access most reporters would kill for, walking straight into VIP areas at some of the biggest stadiums in the country. So, how does a young broadcaster end up with that kind of clearance? Simple. It's in her blood. Paola's brother is Carlos Salcedo, one of Mexico's most recognized soccer players, a defender who anchored the national team and spent years playing across top European leagues. When your brother's that level of famous, doors open. For years, Paola lived inside that world. Big contracts, luxury properties, high-end endorsement deals. She knew the players, the agents, the money men, all the people who move behind the curtain in professional sports. Then, in 2020, everything changed. Martha welcomed a son with Uruguayan soccer player Nicola Viconis. The relationship didn't survive, and the two went their separate ways not long after. Right around that same time, Paola made a decision that surprised a lot of people who'd followed her career. She stepped back, walked away from television, shut down her public presence almost entirely, and started living a much more private life. From that point forward, her world revolved around raising her son and building something of her own, a jewelry business. On the surface, it looked like the picture of success. Independent woman, running her own company, driving nice cars, raising her kid. Everything checked out. But here's the thing that should make you pause. How often does someone with a direct line to fame, someone who could ride that spotlight for years, just walk away from it overnight? Usually people chase that kind of exposure. Paola cut it off completely, and that wasn't an accident. That was a decision. She built a wall around her private life and only let in the people she trusted. Because as her brother's career kept climbing, Paola wasn't just family. She was involved, trusted with pieces of his financial affairs, managing parts of his business. And while the public saw a successful single mom running a jewelry line, behind closed doors, the Salcedo family was starting to come apart. Paola's picture-perfect life was a surface. Underneath it, there were legal disputes brewing, the kind that don't stay quiet forever. The peaceful life she'd built for herself was really just the calm before a war over millions of dollars in family assets. Now, let's rewind to 2018, because that's the year the cracks in this close-knit family image started showing for the first time. Carlos made headlines when he fired his own father as his agent. According to Carlos, it came down to money. He publicly accused his dad of mishandling his earnings and betraying his trust. But his father wasn't the only one he called out. Carlos also claimed his sister had been getting close to other players around the league, gathering personal details about his private life, and using that information to boost ratings on her TV programs, and to line her own pockets. What started as a public war of words turned into a legal battle over real estate. And that's when another detail surfaced. Years earlier, Carlos had reportedly been advised to protect his assets from potential legal claims tied to unrelated matters. So, he transferred ownership of his house to his sister, and put 2 of his vehicles under his mother's name, Maria Isabel, standard move. Protect the assets, then transfer everything back once the risk passed. Except when Carlos asked for it all back, his mother and sister said no. Their reasoning was straightforward. Carlos was married to Andrea Navarro, and under their marital property agreement, they believed those multi-million-dollar assets could eventually end up under Andrea's control, and they weren't willing to let that happen. Things escalated even further when Martha told Carlos she believed his wife had been unfaithful. Carlos responded with a public statement, making it clear he was capable of running his own life without outside interference. Then he cut off contact with his parents and with his sister completely. Think about the scale of what we're looking at here. A family feud that should have stayed behind closed doors was now playing out through frozen assets, legal filings, and public statements for the whole country to see. And that was only the beginning. Now let's fast forward 5 years to the spring of 2023, because by this point, the conflict inside the Salcedo family had already crossed a line most families never come close to. It had moved from courtrooms into criminal investigations. In March, Jose Felix, the uncle of Carlos and Martha Paola, was shot and killed, multiple gunshot wounds. And this wasn't happening in a vacuum. Everyone close to the family already knew there was a bitter dispute simmering over inheritance and valuable land. According to police reports, shortly before Jose Felix died, Martha Paola and an unidentified man had met with him, and investigators later alleged that threats were made during that meeting. Just days later, he was dead. Then came an accusation nobody expected. Jose Felix's aunt walked into the prosecutor's office in Jalisco and filed a formal complaint, naming Martha Paola and her mother, Maria Isabel, as the people responsible for arranging the shooting. Let that sink in for a second. A family known across the country for wealth and success, now facing accusations of orchestrating a murder from within. What started as a dispute over inherited property had turned into formal allegations of a planned, violent crime inside one family. That was the atmosphere Martha Paola was living in during the final year of her life. Constant suspicion, ongoing lawsuits, relatives publicly accusing each other of some of the most serious crimes on the books. Now, let's go back to the summer of 2024, just days after the shooting near the traveling circus. Investigators need to trace the SUV's route backward to figure out exactly where this attack began. That trail leads them to a dirt parking lot outside a circus in the state of Mexico. And right away they run into a serious problem. The scene was never secured. Local officers and forensic teams didn't lock it down fast enough, and in the chaos, evidence gets scattered, disturbed, lost. Shell casings, tire tracks, all of it compromised within the first few hours. For any investigator, losing a clean crime scene is a massive setback. It makes every piece of the puzzle harder to place. With physical evidence compromised, detectives lean on eyewitnesses. And what those witnesses describe is unsettling in its simplicity. The attack came out of nowhere. Shooters appear, open fire, and vanish in seconds. Early reports point to a random street robbery. But something about how the attackers moved doesn't quite fit that story. While detectives are still working the scene near the circus, the case explodes across national media. Every network picks it up. And then the real shock comes, not from outside the family, but from within it. Paola's mother posts a photo of her daughter online. She demands justice, and she names names. According to her, the people behind this shooting are her own son, Carlos, and his wife, Andrea. Sit with that for a second. And there's another detail buried in her statement that makes the story even harder to look away from. According to the family, almost immediately after his sister was killed, Carlos reached out to his club's front office, asking for an emergency transfer. He wanted out of Mexico as fast as possible, hoping to continue his career in the US or Canada. Fighting your family over property in court is one thing. Trying to leave the country while you're being publicly accused of orchestrating an attack on your own sister is something else entirely. Prosecutors take those public accusations seriously enough to fold them into the investigation. No warrant is issued for Carlos at this point, but the direction of the case shifts. Investigators launch a full-scale sweep, pulling surveillance footage from every traffic camera surrounding the circus grounds. Meanwhile, forensic teams finish Martha Paola's autopsy. 3 gunshot wounds, 1 fatal. A bullet through the chest that tore through her right lung and caused rapid internal bleeding. Medically speaking, there was almost no chance of survival at the scene. At the same time, firearms experts finish examining the Suburban, now sitting in a police impound lot. They pull bullet fragments from the door panels and the interior, and they're able to identify the caliber and match rifling marks. Solid physical evidence that could eventually tie a specific weapon to this shooting. But how do you find the shooters when the crime scene itself was trampled within minutes? The answer is digital. Investigators pull terabytes of footage from traffic cameras and private security systems across every likely escape route. Analysts spend hours cross-referencing footage with the timing of Paola's last phone call, and eventually, it pays off. They catch the attacker's motorcycle on camera. Whoever planned this thought ahead. No license plate on the bike, but they missed one detail. The motorcycle itself is distinct, a black sport bike with bright red accents on the tank. And on the empty plate bracket, there's a sticker shaped like a pair of spread wings. That one detail becomes the break in the case. Analysts use that sticker to track the same motorcycle across dozens of camera angles, piecing together its entire route. Side streets, a highway on-ramp, and finally, disappearing into a residential neighborhood in the state of Mexico. In a matter of hours, a search area covering millions of people narrows down to a handful of city blocks. Officers start quietly checking garages, driveways, parking lots, looking for a black and red bike with no plate. And for the first time, investigators have a real edge. This isn't a blind search anymore. They know what they're looking for, and roughly where to look. From here, they have to move carefully. Tip off the wrong person, and that motorcycle disappears for good, along with whoever was riding it. Then, on July 5th, 2024, just 6 days after the shooting, the case breaks wide open. Police arrest 2 men. And here's the irony. It isn't during some carefully planned raid. Officers stumble onto them in the middle of an entirely unrelated street robbery. The suspects are identified as Miguel Angel, known on the street as El Pecas, and Jose Ivan. Once they're in custody, investigators connect both of them directly to the black and red motorcycle from the surveillance footage. Faced with the evidence, both men admit to being involved. Their story is almost disappointingly simple. They say they were under the influence that day, ran out of money and drugs, and went looking for an easy target. They spotted a well-off woman alone in a dirt parking lot, tried to rob her, met unexpected resistance, and panicked. That's when the shots were fired. Both suspects are transferred to a state detention facility, waiting on a judge to decide whether there's enough here to move forward with formal charges. Now, stop and think about that for a second. This investigation started with a motive that felt massive. Millions of dollars, years of resentment, a family tearing itself apart in public. And then, almost overnight, it collapses down to 2 guys looking for quick cash on a bad day. Given everything we already know about this family, that's a hard coincidence to swallow. Martha Paola's mother certainly wasn't buying the robbery theory. Maria Isabel kept insisting publicly that the suspect's confession was nothing more than a cover story, something rehearsed and convenient. She demanded that investigators treat the 2 men in custody as hired hands, carrying out somebody else's plan. And right at that moment, the case takes another sharp turn. While Maria Isabel keeps making accusations online, prosecutors make a move of their own. The Attorney General's office in Jalisco issues an arrest warrant for Maria Isabel herself. Where does that come from? It traces back to the uncle, Jose Felix, shot and killed back in the spring of 2023. That case never closed. Authorities eventually arrested the man they believe carried out that attack, and once in custody, he agreed to cooperate. According to his statement, he says he was paid to carry out that killing by Maria Isabel and her daughter, Martha Paola. After the warrant becomes public, Maria Isabel records another video. She denies everything and says she has a solid alibi. She was recovering from major surgery in early March of that year, 10 days in bed. And Martha Paola was right there with her the entire time, taking care of her. She calls the warrant a fabricated act of revenge, claiming her famous son used his influence inside the prosecutor's office to silence her. And just like that, everything flips. The woman who'd been publicly demanding justice for her daughter is now a fugitive herself, wanted in connection with the death of another family member. Let's go back now to where this all started, June 29th, 2024, and walk through exactly how the attack happened. Around 3 p.m., Martha Paola is at a traveling circus in the state of Mexico with her 4-year-old son, Luca, his nanny, and a man from her inner circle. During the show, she steps outside for some air. Luca stays inside with the nanny. Paola walks toward the parking lot where her Suburban is parked, and the man with her follows a short distance behind, keeping his distance. She reaches the SUV but doesn't get in. She stops by the rear doors and answers a phone call. That's the exact moment the black and red motorcycle rolls into the lot. Jose Ivan's driving, Miguel Angel's riding behind him, gun already in hand, angled toward her, without either of them needing to dismount. The bike closes the gap in seconds and stops right next to the SUV. There's a brief struggle. They go for her valuables. She fights back, refuses to hand anything over. And that's when Miguel Angel raises the gun and fires 3 shots at point-blank range. From that distance, she never had a real chance. Here's what stands out when you look at the timing. This attack happens in an unbelievably narrow window, the exact moment she's stepped away from the crowd, alone, distracted by a phone call. That's a strangely precise moment for what's supposed to be a random street robbery. The second the shots are fired, the motorcycle takes off and disappears within seconds. Paola's only alone for a moment before the man who followed her out reaches her side. He gets her into the back seat of the Suburban, jumps behind the wheel, and speeds toward the highway, trying to flag down police for help. And that's how the timeline comes full circle. Now let's jump to the middle of July 2024, when the legal side of this story starts producing real developments. On July 18th, Carlos Salcedo finally sits down with investigators and gives his official statement. 2 days later, exactly what his mother had predicted publicly comes true. On July 20th, Carlos signs the paperwork terminating his contract with his club. He says a quiet goodbye to fans and leaves the country without a word to the media. The emergency transfer he'd reportedly been chasing becomes real, fast, leaving behind far more questions than answers. As of today, prosecutors in the state of Mexico haven't changed their original conclusion. Their theory remains that this was a robbery that spiraled out of control. Miguel Angel and Jose Ivan are still in custody, waiting for their case to move through the courts. Neither Carlos nor Andrea has ever been formally charged in connection with this crime. Maria Isabel's situation is different. The woman who once demanded justice louder than anyone is now the subject of an active arrest warrant of her own, tied to the death of her brother. She remains missing, fully aware that authorities are looking for her. For me, the most unsettling part of this whole case is the contrast. On one side, stadium lights, multi-million-dollar contracts, celebrity status. On the other, lawsuits, public accusations, and gunfire in a dusty parking lot outside a traveling circus. In the end, it feels like this family slowly tore itself apart from the inside. So, what do you think? Did investigators actually get to the truth here? Or is 2 guys looking for quick cash simply the easiest story for everyone still standing to live with? Drop your theory in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want more cases like this one, make sure you're subscribed because we're covering another true crime documentary next week.